Everything was going fine and well until the strange man rang our bell. Our home is in no way particularly special as far as I would be able to judge. Naturally, I haven't seen every person and every home in every country yet, which makes it a tad difficult to say for sure. From everything on the outside, going all the way to the inside, however, I would classify this as typically normal. My mother has shiny white teeth, with a smudge of MAC's ruby red lipstick on them when she smiles without a warning. She wears bright dresses, and hair that is much higher than mine because of all the hairspray and products she uses. Personally, I'm not a fan of the smell. It always makes me a bit dizzy. Dad wears suits, sometimes even on days when he doesn't go to work. He has thick glasses and cleans his loafers with black polish. Then there's my brother Robbie, who was born exactly 3 years after me. Well, not entirely exactly, of course. His birthday is 1 day after mine, so we never have to share our cake. He likes red velvet, and I prefer key lime. Lastly, we have Lulu, who is a French bulldog and the laziest one of us all. We live in the suburbs, inside a pastel yellow house that we need to paint regularly because you always spot the dirt right away. It's a drag and a half, climbing up all the time, but it's worth it. The cleanliness on the outside makes my mum happy, and her smile is the absolute best. Most people on our street care for their homes the same way. As I said, we are fairly normal. We play board games at times, watch movies together, or do our own personal things. I would say that my family and I are happy. We have everything we need, and troubles usually stay away in our home, where the sun always shines. Well, not inside, obviously, but we do see it through the windows. I would assume that we would have continued everything just the same for even longer because there is no need to change a life that is just perfectly fine. Maybe I would have stayed in the neighbourhood even after getting a job and buying my own house. That's all speculative, but it seemed totally probable. It all seemed right until of course it didn't anymore. Change is inevitable, I've heard. It hit us like a rocket smashing through the ceiling, except it was much quieter and positively more terrible. Does that sound weird? I suppose it does. Because the thing that changed it all was the sound of our doorbell, and the man that stood tall in our front yard, waving his hand and head simultaneously. Did he ring the bell and then walk all the way back there? Dad asked with a furrowed brow. I shrugged. Top of the morning to you, neighbour. Is everything all right? He called out in glee when my dad opened the door. I just stood behind my father, curious as to who this new man could be. I had never seen him on the street before. Well, good morning. Did you just move in? Dad politely asked. He had to hold his hand over his eyes because of how incredibly bright the sun was shining that day. I still remember the warmth it radiated. In a way, it felt like a persuasion technique to increase the feeling of comfort. But of course, the sun wasn't trying to manipulate us. That's just ridiculous. The man started laughing. You are a true jokester, old Jim, even though I worry I do not find the smudge on your roof as amusing. Dad and I exchanged a look. My father's name wasn't Jim, but Andrew. It seemed like this man was lost. Dad gave me a look that instructed me to stay inside, but I didn't care. I slowly followed him outside. Oh, hello, Trixie. I didn't see you, love. You're not in school this beautiful day? The stranger asked me. I tried to move closer, but Dad was gently holding on to my sweater. I could tell that he was a bit worried, even if it was the middle of the day. We knew most of our neighbours. That's what makes the suburbs, well, suburbs. You greet your neighbours by name, and when you're new, you go from house to house introducing yourself with a plate of cookies. It's Sunday, and who the hell is Trixie? I muttered. Don't be rude, Millie, and don't swear. Dad sternly spoke, but I could tell that he was just as perplexed as I was. This strange man looked absolutely normal on the outside, dressed clean in a polo shirt and cargo pants, with dark brown hair gelled to the back. A little old school maybe, but still rather regular. Millie, the man repeated. You are correct. Today is Sunday, and schools are closed on Sundays. It's a religious thing, isn't it? He was speaking as if he was reading the words off note cards in the air. Dad and I did not know what to respond, so we simply nodded. It certainly was a strange beginning to our Sunday. Right, so, neighbour, Dad mumbled. Arnold, the man confidently spoke. Arnold, of course. I believe you must have mistaken us for another family. Were you coming to visit someone here? He asked. Visiting. Oh, Jim, you are the absolute best. Incredibly funny at all times. We moved here more than a decade ago. Don't you remember? Yes, of course. Where did you live before again? Oh, the sweet little town of Marville. You should go there sometime. It's best during autumn. We used to visit often, but then we decided that this little neighbourhood fits us much better. It feels so welcoming. Now he was at least making eye contact with us and not acting like he was reading off a script. We were so distracted I almost didn't notice the woman approaching from next door. I had never seen her face before, but somehow she dressed very similarly to my mother, only less colourful, as if she had stolen her dresses and dyed them black. Arnold, honey, don't bother Marcus with our boring old stories. She walked up to Anthony and tucked her arm into his. Her long plastic nails were dug deep into his arm. You could see the marks when she let go. Jim, Arnold corrected her. Andrew, actually, Dad said. There's two of them, I whispered. The woman smiled even brighter. Anyway, honey, did you tell Andrew? Right, yes, buddy. We noticed a little smudge on the upper left corner of your roof. Maybe it was a bird. We just felt it tainted our pretty little neighbourhood a little. Don't you agree? I looked up towards the roof. No idea what they were talking about. If there was a spot, then it must have been the tiniest one you could think of. Of course. We'll make sure to fix it. Splendid, the woman said. Well, Andrew, we hope to see you and your beautiful wife tonight. Tonight? Yes, it's poker night. Did you forget? The man responded. Anyway, we should get going. See you, neighbour. They both turned around and started walking towards the house right next to ours, where the Joneses live, or rather lived. They opened the door and went inside, like it really was their home. I wanted to ask Dad if our neighbours had moved away. It felt very strange. We would have seen a moving truck or something, and they surely would have said their goodbyes. We weren't close with the Joneses, but still, it's simply the polite thing to do. From the expression on my father's face, however, I knew he had no more an answer to this absurd situation than me, and so we quickly made our way back inside the house. Neither Mum nor Robbie had any idea who those neighbours were. It wasn't surprising that Robbie had no clue. I'd be surprised if he recognised any of our neighbours at all. But Mum spends much time in the front yard, caring for the flowers. And she knows many other adults that lived around here. How strange that they never introduced themselves, she said during dinner. Maybe they're not looking for social contacts. Well, that's the thing, honey. They acted as if they knew us already. And I almost forgot, they invited us to some kind of poker thing tonight. Mum raised an eyebrow. We should go then, I suppose. It's always good to know your neighbours, especially if they seem a bit eccentric. We'd rather be on their good side. She shoved a big fork of spaghetti in her mouth. Dad was tapping his nails on the dining room table. I could tell that he was feeling a bit off, and I couldn't blame him. I didn't trust those new neighbours either. I didn't think my mother was really grasping how absurd that situation earlier had felt. Those people looked nice and friendly on the outside, but they were terrifying. I felt it, and I think so did my father. I'm not sure, love. I was painting the roof all afternoon. I'm feeling a bit tired. Tomorrow, then. I'll bake a cake and we can bring it over. Mum always cared for the appearances much more than the rest of us. The following evening, my parents wanted to make an appearance next door. I could tell that my father was nervous, but my mother seemed almost excited in a way. Possibly because she never liked the Joneses much, and she did appreciate the concern of our new neighbours for clean aesthetics. But that's because she hadn't met those nutcases yet. They told me to stay at home with Robbie, but my brother wasn't that young anymore, and just like me, he was curious about the new change. We waited until my parents walked over and slowly followed them. We hid behind a hedge to make sure nobody would see us. I'm not sure why we were acting so carefully. It was a normal day in a normal neighbourhood after all, and we usually go with our parents to meet neighbours and play with their kids when we were young. Of course, Arnold and his wife were a bit different. "Want to play football?" A high-pitched voice spoke out of nowhere. "Shit," I blurted out. The voice came from behind the hedge. It was a little girl with ash-blonde hair that looked only slightly younger than my brother. "Mum and Dad said to play with the other kids," she continued. I looked over to Robbie, who didn't seem concerned, and so I told her he would play with her. On our lawn, however, nearby. I was so distracted by the girl that I didn't see how my parents went inside. But I did hear sounds that made me assume there were more people in there. "Who else is in your home? Do you know?" I asked the girl. She dropped the football without batting an eye and walked closer. "The ones with the clean house, and the ones with the dirty one," she said, while not blinking once. As a matter of fact, she didn't blink afterwards either. The one with the dirty house. She probably meant the Smiths, who are both workaholics. The look of their home is the least of their concerns. I hear Mum judge them often. "Do you have visitors often?" She shrugged and continued to play with my brother. Carefully, I walked closer to the house of the strange neighbours. I'd almost made it to the window, when suddenly the eyes of Arnold's wife met mine. Just like her daughter, she didn't blink. She smiled at me and slowly closed the curtains. I took a step back when I suddenly heard a shriek coming from the house. Worried about my parents, I collected all my courage and ran towards their door, which to my surprise opened wide. First, Dad came outside, followed by Mum. They both had red splatters on their face. "What?" I tried to say, but the look on my father's face made me stop speaking. They slowly but surely came out onto the street. Arnold was just behind him, with far more splatters on his face and teeth, while he was smiling brightly. "We should repeat this, neighbours. Always good to see you, Jim." "Likewise," my dad mumbled. "Come on, kids. We should go inside and clean a little," he then said towards us. From the other side of the streets, I saw another couple of strangers standing on the lawn of our opposite neighbours. 2 parents, 2 children, and a dog. The parents were waving their hands and heads simultaneously. I lived in a normal house, with a normal family. The issue is that ever since that particular Sunday, we were the only normal ones around, and we only noticed that something had changed when the parasites rang our bell. We packed our bags, Mum made sandwiches for the road, and we loaded up the car. My parents were acting awfully normal. It was time for a change anyway, and we would leave early that evening. When we were pulling out of the driveway, Arnold and his wife waved and smiled. Robbie waved back, but Dad told him to stop. He had his eyes set on the road, but I noticed how he was trembling. They tried their best to hide it from us, to make things feel normal, but even my parents had no idea what had suddenly become of our life. They were just as terrified as I was. They were terrified that these creatures would do to us what they did to our former neighbours. We were lucky, however. We managed to leave. I suppose they were fine with our decision, as they were expecting a new family to come and replace us anyway. I assume they liked our way of living, but they weren't satisfied with how we kept our house lately. The smudge that stayed longer than a day was close to the limit. Us voluntarily moving took away the hassle of making us disappear.
Hello listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please check out the author in the description. For more content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more sinister readings.